So chances are, if you're watching this video, you've already had an account closed by Mercury, or you're worried that an account closure might be coming. Well, in this video, I'm going to give you a quick rundown on the situation. I'm going to share what no one else is saying, and I'm also going to tell you what to do next to open a new business bank account as fast as possible remotely. And yes, this will be relevant for foreign founders living outside of the United States, as well as foreign founders legally residing in the US, since it looks like both of these groups are being impacted by Mercury account closures right now. But first, if this is your first time on the channel, my name is Chris. I'm the head of banking relationships here at Global Banks. We help businesses, business owners, and investors open bank accounts all around the world, including in the US. And that includes helping a lot of founders navigate closures and get new accounts set up as quickly as possible, including both primary and backup accounts. Now, a quick recap for you. If you did have an account closed by Mercury, you are not alone. It looks like Mercury added around 17 new countries to its prohibited countries list. That's compared to a recent list that we were able to find from mid-2023. Now, Mercury's communications team is being peppered with questions on social, and their standard response is that these closures are the result of a policy update. More specifically, an update to their prohibited countries list. This would suggest that one of Mercury's partner banks has forced the company to adjust the jurisdictions that they're able to support. Or maybe Mercury did this proactively, following the extra scrutiny that has emerged during the Evolve Bank and Trust and Synapse debacle. Whatever the reason, Mercury can no longer support clients residing in these countries. And it's these countries in green that appear to have been recently added to the list. Now, in all fairness, we're not surprised by the vast majority of these new additions. They closely mirror what we're seeing at basically any financial institution with a competent compliance team. Though maybe Croatia and Philippines are a bit of a stretch, but the other countries are places that we would expect to see on a prohibited list, including Ukraine, which has been getting a lot of attention on social media. But here's the thing. When a country is prohibited, it's not just about where the business operates from or where the founder has residency. It's also about where transactions are being sent to and from, and where the account is being accessed, meaning the IP address. Now, I'm gonna guess that it's these other factors that are playing a big role in the account closures for US companies with foreign founders sitting in the United States, which is too bad because Mercury is actually a very foreigner-friendly platform, and it's been the first stop for a wide range of foreign owners of US companies from many different countries. But now, due to the update to their prohibited countries list, these non-US citizen founders and non-US resident founders appear to be the target of these account closures. And just to be clear, we fully understand the policy is not intended to impact US companies with foreign founders who reside in the US. But again, we're seeing a lot of chatter about this group being impacted, which again suggests that other factors like transaction activity, IP addresses, and even verified physical addresses could be the cause of these closures. Now, we don't know what percentage of Mercury's customer accounts are being impacted by these closures. I suspect it's a very small amount, but if you are a foreigner who has had an account closed by Mercury or any other US bank recently, I'm going to tell you what to do next. And you can then take this information and start opening accounts for yourself, or if you want, you can use one of our account opening services to help you through the process. It's totally up to you. Now, to try and make this as actionable as possible, I am going to break this down into two key groups. First, foreign founders who reside in the US. If that's you, I'm going to share in-person options along with the deposit and opening requirements, though without a doubt, this is the easy case. The second group is where account opening starts to get complicated, and that's for foreign founders living outside of the United States. If that's you, you do still have US banking options, and I'm gonna walk you through them, starting with remote options. I'm gonna tell you what's possible, what's not possible, and how much it's gonna cost you in terms of deposits. I'll also share the in-person options for foreigners living outside of the US in case you wanna jump on a plane and try to open accounts in person with less money. And finally, as a bonus, I'm gonna talk through a few additional fintech platforms that you might want to consider adding on to your new brick and mortar bank accounts in order to reduce costs and reduce the chances of future account closures. Okay, so let's jump into the first group. Foreign founders who reside in the United States. Now, before you think about opening a new bank account, the first thing that you should do is open up your email and contact Mercury customer support. And the reason for that is that you're legally residing in the United States, and you should be viewed as a US person from a banking and compliance perspective. So it's possible that your company's account was accidentally closed. Now, this assumes that you were not transacting with any prohibited countries, you didn't have an accountant sitting in one of these countries logging into your Mercury account, and you didn't didn't previously provide a business or personal address from one of these prohibited countries. If none of these things apply to you, maybe you got swept up into the closure list because of your passport accidentally, and you might have a chance of reactivating your account. Now, let's say that isn't an option for you, and your Mercury account is closed for good. Well, I'm not going to try and diminish the impact of account closures, but if you're a foreigner sitting in the US with a green card, you're in a great spot when it comes to banking. Instead, the biggest problem you're going to face, which is still a massive headache, is going to be getting your account set up, automated transactions sorted in terms of deposits or debits, dealing with vendors, suppliers, customers, and basically navigating the onboarding process from an administrative perspective. And from the time of closure, you have 15 business days to get it done, which might feel tight, but it is possible, especially if you're a US resident. And I promise it's a much better situation than what foreigners living outside of the US are going to have to deal with. Now, in most cases, foreigners in the United States, they can get accounts up and running in a matter of days. That includes with all the majors, think banks like Chase, Citi, Wells, etc. And depending on your size, location, and goals, one of these banks might be better than the others. But frankly, if you don't have any other accounts already open, pick two of the banks that are closest to you and go and open accounts right now. The minimum deposits at these banks are going to be between $1,500 and $2,500 US for a US company to open and maintain an account with zero fees, which is why you should open two accounts at these different banks. And at these deposit levels, there's literally no excuse for any real business not to have a backup account. Now, in terms of applying, the documents and proofs that you'll need to provide will be really straightforward. Think passport, US tax ID, proof of US address as the account signatory, US address for the company, as well as your US phone number. But the big question here isn't about the process to open the account, it's actually whether the bank will accept your business in the first place, even though you are a US resident. For example, if you're sending and receiving transfers from countries that these banks deem high risk or outside of their risk tolerance, then you could end up with a similar situation to your current closure at Mercury. So a quick pro tip here is to look at your transaction profile. And before you send an international wire, stop and ask yourself, am I about to send money to a conflict zone? Or basically any prohibited country, or any country that a US bank might consider to be a conflict zone? If so, don't send the wire from your primary bank account, and instead use one of the alternative solutions that I'll share in the next section of this video. But before we get into those solutions, let's jump into the second group, which is foreign founders outside of the United States. If that's you, you typically have three different approaches that you can take to open a US bank account with real brick and mortar US banks. Though I should point out the available options obviously depend on where you live, since certain countries are still going to be prohibited by these other banks. But assuming you live outside of a prohibited country, you should be able to find a few options that will work for you. And the best way to explain this is by deposit amount. Now, I'm going to start by getting the easiest option out of the way. So if you can deposit at least six figures, $100,000 and up, and you have a business that's generating at least $1 million in revenue or is doubling year over year, then you might be able to open with some of the major US banks 100% remotely. This is not an option that banks publicize, and it is available to foreign non-resident owned US companies. I know because we help clients open this way all the time. So if that sounds like it could work for you, drop us an email at info@globalbanks.com and we'll let you know if you qualify. Now, the second option takes us to the other end of the deposit spectrum between $1,500 and $2,500 US. Here, you basically need to get on a plane, and you're going to approach some of the major US banks that we discussed in the previous section. But it is not going to be as easy for you as it is for foreigners who actually live in the US. And the main reason for that is these major US banks almost always want to see an address in the United States. Now, if you have a US address for the business and proof of that address, then you can open these US bank accounts by visiting a branch and meeting the requirements. In fact, if you're willing to deposit at least $10,000 in the business account, we can even help you get pre-approved, and then you just show up to sign the final papers. But if you don't have a US address, I just want to caution you, before you go out and get a mail forwarding address, that won't be an option at major US banks. They don't accept mail forwarders or addresses that are classified as CMRA, meaning commercial mail receiving addresses. And that means PO boxes won't work either. So what do we suggest? Well, we suggest you consider option number 3, which is opening with US banks that do not require a US address or proof of a US address. And yes, these banks do exist. Now, just to be clear, I am talking about FDIC insured US banks, no fintech platforms, and no quasi-US banks like IFEs in Puerto Rico. The options that I'm referring to are real US banks with FDIC insurance and branches across the United States. Now, to open with these banks as a foreign non-resident owner of a US company, you typically need to deposit between $25,000 on the low end and $250,000 at the high end. Obviously, the higher that you can go on that range, the more options you'll have available to you. Though even then, we don't suggest maintaining a balance beyond $250,000 in any one account. Instead, if you're looking to maintain a balance at $250,000 or higher, you should spread it out across multiple banks, or look at holding your funds directly with an FDIC-insured bank that makes use of sweep accounts. So again, foreigners living in the United States, they have a ton of options available to them. Foreigners living outside of the US, they have more limited options, but opening accounts is still possible. Basically, if that's you, you can show up in person if you have a US address, and you can open with a deposit between $1,500 and $2,500 at banks like Chase, Citi, Wells, etc., etc. If you have a US address, a company that is doubling annually, and you can deposit $100,000, then you can open with major US banks remotely. And if you don't have a US address, then you can deposit $25,000, and you'll also have remote options available. And these are still FDIC insured US banks. Okay, now before I jump into the tools that you should be connecting to your bank account to avoid future closures, I just want to add a quick note here about industry. Since so far in this video, we've only been talking about country risk. And when it comes to industry, that's one of the most basic parameters that compliance teams will look at to see if your business qualifies for a bank account. So if you're a founder with a business that is considered high risk or is involved in any gray market activities, fringe industries, or even industries that banks just generally look down on, think crypto-related businesses, then you're going to struggle to open accounts with these traditional banks. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but it is going to be difficult. So I just want to temper your expectations. Okay, now let's talk about tools for reducing the risk of future account closures. Obviously, there are cross-border service providers like Wise. It's excellent. If you don't have an account, you absolutely should for facilitating cross-border transfers. And there are other options that you should be exploring as well, especially if you're sending and receiving funds to specific regions like Europe, Asia, Africa, even Latin America. But if you're doing any level of volume, which most businesses are, usually above $200,000 per year in total transaction volume, then you might want to explore FX platforms instead. And I say this because these FX platforms can typically offer much more competitive rates, access to a wider range of currencies, and this is key, they're usually able to send and receive transfers to a wider range of countries than traditional banks. Meaning, if you have contractors, employees, or even customers in countries that could risk your bank accounts being closed, using one of these FX platforms could help protect your business from those closures. Now, each platform is different, so if you have specific countries you're trying to send money to and receive money from, just email us at info@globalbanks.com and let us know which countries you're optimizing for, and we'll see if we can point you in the right direction. Okay, if you got any value out of this video, please drop us a like, and if you want more business banking insights, make sure you subscribe so you get alerted the next time that we publish. And if you need help opening US accounts for your business, either in person or remotely, you can check out globalbanks.com/USA. And if you'd like to learn more about US account closures, what triggers them, and what to watch out for, you can watch this video right here. That's it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.